Hi there. This is First Draft, and I'm Julia Kelly. We are back after a few months hiatus because of the winter months. We've been hiding from all the snow and rain and sleet and everything, except for Lexi, who lives in Florida. But we're back today, and we're talking about problematic heroines. It's a subject that we first tackled back in fall of 2013, I think it was, and we're excited to revisit it and also bring in another voice, which is Mary Chris Escobar. So I'm going to start out with a quick introduction of everybody. Alexis Anne, you want to tell us who you are and what it is that you write?
Hi, I'm Alexis Anne. I write contemporary and erotic romance, and apparently sometime this year I'll also be writing science fiction and action adventure.
Mary Chris.
I'm Mary Chris Escobar. I write women's fiction, also known as chick lit, and that's it right now.
And I'm, again, Julia Kelly, and I write contemporary and historical romance. So I'm going to open up tonight talking a little bit about the heroine and how important she is to all the genres that we write, since we write very female-centered books. I thought that would be a pretty good place to start. So Alexis, you want to kick us off? Thoughts on the heroine and how important she is, or not important?
Well, she's super important, but the problem is that a lot of the time you don't know what to do with the heroine. Do you make her strong? Do you make her weak? Do you make her dynamic? Does she have a lot of family connections, friend connections? When you're writing a romance, it can be difficult. Do you keep everything about the romance, or do you show her outside life? So, and women in particular, I think, are an interesting subject because they're sisters, they're daughters, they're wives, they're mothers. Some of them are stay-at-home moms, they're career women. You do so many things with a heroine, and it's just a matter of which way you're going.
Yeah, Mary Chris, is there anything in particular that when you're starting to write a book and you're looking at your heroine, what are you looking to do in framing her? How do you approach that?
Yeah, gosh, different ways, I think, depending on what the story that you're writing is. But I guess my first and foremost goal is always to I want to have a heroine who's relatable and who's also kind of multi-dimensional. I want her to not be just, all goodwill and good intention. I want her to kind of have some flaws. So I think I always want to have a heroine, I guess, if I could put it really succinctly, who seems very human and real and has flaws that a reader will relate to. And then you can go any myriad number of ways from there, and it kind of depends on the story and the plot and what's going to happen. But I really do like writing a heroine who is, I think, truly first and foremost strong, but also has some character flaws, and that maybe you can see yourself in as a reader, and so that it doesn't seem like this kind of perfect character on a pedestal, but seems like somebody who could, I don't know, be your friend and sit down and have a beer with you.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember who told me this, but I was told by somebody that if your hero is in romance kind of the fantasy, right? He's whatever the desirable thing is that you want. The heroine's the backbone, and she's going to be the one who's propping up the story and driving the story, and she's the one that is often going to have the most visceral reaction from readers also. So you really have to be careful and like you said, make her multifaceted and give her flaws and characteristics that make her seem a lot more human, and potentially somebody that you would sit down and have a beer with. And we can talk a little bit later about whether that's always necessary. But how about when it goes wrong? What happens when you... We've all read and seen movies and books where your heroine is problematic, and that's the topic of this discussion. What happens when it goes terribly, terribly wrong?
In like in writing a character who's going wrong on the page? Is that
Sure.
what you're asking? Okay. I would burn the book and start over.
From an author's standpoint.
Yes. I thought that's what we were going with. Is that not what we're going with?
Well, hopefully you're not burning all your books when you're a reader, but
Well, from a writing standpoint, I've definitely written a character that, you know, you're just writing as you're going, and then all of a sudden you stop and somebody's reading it and they're like, I really don't like this character, and you're like, why? I put so much into her. And then you start reading it, oh, what did I do? And in those cases, you have to tease out what it was you were going for, and then really start back at the beginning, and not make her terrible.
Yeah, not making her terrible is a pretty big goal.
I've done it a couple times.
I think everybody has. I think the thing that you have in your head and the thing that gets out on the page are not always the same thing. And figuring out how to meet in the middle is it's a skill, and it's something that's difficult, and often you don't realize until you get into edits and somebody sends it back to you with a very nice comment that's something along the lines of, so I really liked your book, but I have this thing about your heroine, and you realize that it's not going well, and you're going to need to do some serious work.
For me,
and I think that's...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's, you know, when you're trying to write that heroine who is kind of multidimensional and flawed, sometimes one dimension can get out of control, you know, and she can come across, you know, too aggressive or maybe too passive or too, you know, so as you can kind of lose some of those dimensions, I think, or she can just come across flat because you're I don't know, not trying to do too much or too little. So yeah, I think that's the challenge in trying to write those characters with lots of different pieces of their personality. It's hard not to let one take over to the point that someone reads it and is like, right, so about that heroine, like, I didn't like her, or she was too likable, or, you know, whatever the thing is.
The too perfect heroine.
The Elizabeth.
Right, yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
So when you're looking to make these characters multifaceted, how are you going about doing that? How do you build kind of a life for your character or a personality for your character and make sure that it's not, even in a romance that is very, very tight and very focused on this one aspect of these people's lives, how do you make sure that these people aren't flat and feel like people?
Sometimes I look at like a checklist, basically, that's in my head, so I can't tell you where to go look for it, but has she had any interaction with family outside of the romance? Has she had any interaction with somebody who's not the hero? Things like that. You know, just kind of take a look at her world, and is it only going in one direction? And if it is, try and find some other avenues, because through that, inherently, you'll either hit on something for her career or her personality or a hobby that she has or something that you just kind of forgot to include in her as you were writing her.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think if you show her kind of in all different parts of her life, then you start to get an idea about those different pieces. So I think if you know, show her with friends, you show her, you know, at work, show her also when she's alone, you know, then I think you start to get those different dimensions of sort of who is she when she's at home quiet by herself, who is she around her friends, who is she in her career world, and then, you know, if you've got the romantic interest, like who is she with that person. So sort of taking a snippet, I think you're exactly right, from each of those areas, you know, kind of shows you the different levels. And also I think, you know, how other characters interact with her. So what other people's reactions are, you know, what her relationships to her friends are, you know, is she the friend that's always giving advice and helping other people that they come to, or is she the one kind of always going to the wise best friend for advice? Like little things like that can help bring in those dimensions.
One of the things that keeps coming up is talking about the heroine in relation to other people. You do see isolated heroines all the time who seem to be completely singularly, you know, workaholics, or, you know, who are isolated within their family and don't really have this outside world, don't have outside friends. What would you say to an author who's working with one of those heroines, and is it ever okay to present one of those people to a group of readers in a book? You know, are there instances where that's the right type of heroine to write?
Absolutely. I think it is a part of human existence that sometimes there are people, especially women, who do live their lives in isolation for multiple reasons, historically or in modern times. So having characters that reflect that story is important. So whether it's a positive story or a negative story. Usually in romance, it's going to end up being a positive story because that's what we do.
Happily ever after.
Happily ever after. But I like seeing flawed characters. I like seeing characters who make poor decisions. I like seeing characters who are in that situation, whether you can empathize from experience or see a friend in that situation. The bad writing, the good writing, it's all important in seeing characters in different situations. But if you're intentionally trying to write a character that way in a positive light, it's important to know why she's isolated and how that affects her psychologically, and then take it from there, because I think that's a really interesting thing to explore.
Does the hero have to provide an outlet out of that isolation?
He does not have to, but a lot of romances use that, I feel, like a crutch. The hero will save her, the Cinderella complex. Your foot will fit in the glass slipper, Prince Charming will rescue you from whatever it is, and you'll live happily ever after. And a lot of romances is based on that one trope right there, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, I think that, I'm revising a book right now that I did write my character in isolation without realizing it. She has no friends. She has no social life outside of work, at least that's presented in this book. And I think part of the reason was that it was a novella and it had to be quite tight. And it had a very constricted word count, and now it's going from being a novella to a 90,000 word book. And that's a lot of difference. That's hundreds of pages of difference. So now I'm going through and building out her character, because that was one of the things in the reread that I realized, was that she was, not that it's sad to not have a large social group and a large group of people. Some people, it doesn't fit their personality, but I found it unbelievable in my own heroine that she would be completely isolated. And I didn't want her to be, because I didn't think it fit with her personality and all of her character traits, that she would be the type of person that would be pulled out of that situation by the hero. I think, she's very much her own person, and she would absolutely have something to say about, anybody thinking that she needed to be rescued. So I think that sometimes your characters will reveal some aspect of that about themselves, especially in rereads and in edits, which I think is where you catch a lot of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. What I was going to say earlier when I talked over Mary Chris was that I've noticed that when I ruin a character, it's because I'm in a mood, and I end up like busting out 3 chapters, and it's weeks later when I realize I was in a really bad mood when I wrote those, and I just infused it into my character, and she's really unlikable for about 6 chapters.
So how do you save an unlikable heroine, other than make her more likable?
I don't know. I guess this is always the big question. I mean, do you have to? I mean, can you, and maybe that's probably another question, but can you leave a heroine unlikable? I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that. I know it's kind of one of those debated topics. But, can someone connect with a story if the heroine is unlikable? I know I sometimes have trouble with connecting with the story if I don't identify in some way with the main character, often what I'm reading, who is female, so who is a heroine. But I don't know. Sometimes there is, something to be learned from that unlikable character, whether it's someone who is truly in isolation, has something, has something that they're hiding or something interesting. I think it's, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It's something I have not ever been able to do. I don't think I really struggle with writing villains, and so maybe that's just like kind of on my mind is how do you write unlikable characters and move a story forward still?
I think there's a time and a place for certain unlikable heroines. I really like tough broads. I like the ones that are just going to tell you exactly what they think and they don't care. But usually there's a reason behind it, and it's either incredible competence at their job or kind of an understanding that they they've become like this because of some sort of difficulty in their lives, and they're the only ones that they can rely on. And so I understand and I buy that as a character trait. What I don't buy is a heroine who is just across the board kind of nasty and doesn't really seem to have those redeeming qualities. And I don't think that you need to be able to sit down and have a beer with, or imagine having a beer with every single character you read. I don't think that would be enjoyable, right? Variety is the spice of life. But what I do think is valuable is having some nuance and some edge to everybody. You don't want Pollyannas the entire time, but on the other end of the spectrum, you don't want the absolute crazy, psycho who's just so unpleasant. You can't even imagine this person functioning in real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I like seeing there's two sides to every coin. Even if you show one side most of the story, you got to show the other side at some point. There's got to be a reason.
Yeah.
So what are the tropes that you guys see that you do not like in terms of your heroines? And we've talked a lot privately about heroes and kind of what doesn't work for us and what does work for us. So what are some of those things that you like seeing and some of those things that are just drive you absolutely crazy? I can kick it off with, I can't stand Too Stupid to Live heroines, and I think they're dying a very deserved death in our genres. Too Stupid to Live heroines are the ones that will run into the darkened basement knowing that a serial killer is down there because they've got to do it because they just, obviously they've got to prove to the hero that they're tough and strong when they don't have any skills to protect themselves or any of these things. So that's the Too Stupid to Live heroine. I kind of always imagine her as the girl in the old cartoons tied down with rope to the railroad tracks as the train is coming by, basically waiting for the hero to save her. So that's my big pet peeve. I just can't handle them at all.
My biggest pet peeve is probably not within the romance genre, so I'm going to say it anyway. It's the woman must die or be raped or murdered or something horrible has to happen to the woman in order to give the hero purpose or to give him a call to action or something like that. Mm-hmm. Those drive me absolutely batty. I'll stop reading a book. I'll watch a movie. I'll stop watching a movie. I just no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think thankfully those are less common in very women-centric genres like romance, like women's fiction, because you need those female characters to drive the story through, right?
Well, you do see the hero who he hasn't loved in 10 years, yes, kind of stories, and every once in a while I find one that I absolutely love and I eat it up like it's ice cream on a hot day. But most of the time, I just want to close the book and no, thank you. It's not for me.
Understandable.
Yeah. I think you guys you've really kind of hit on the major ones. I think also something that is kind of dying out and not really happening as much, but that used to bother me was kind of the woman whose only goal in life is to get married. Mm-hmm. In fact, I actually feel like I must have been reading a lot of that at some point, like years ago, when I sat down to write my first book, because I specifically wanted to write a main character who had some problems with commitment and had a little bit of phobia around that, because, I feel like that I wasn't hearing that voice, and it was just always like the main character and then all of her friends. It was kind of this just like massive rush to like get married, and that was the only thing driving the plot forward. Like, it's fine if that's a side goal and something that your heroine really wants, along with some other things, but it was just like that was it. Like, that was the plot. Like, when is, how am I going to find a husband and how am I going to get married? And I think that's probably the big one for me that'll cause me to just close a book and be like, what else? Like, what else is going on?
Do you like to cook? Do you like to go for hikes? No, it's right. Where's my husband?
Just get the ring on the finger. That's it.
Right. Do you want that degree for any reason other than to meet people at that school? Like, right, yeah.
It's a very 50s-esque feeling to it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I feel like you still run across it every now and then, but yes, I think it definitely has that feeling.
Kind of jumping off of that, one of my, it's more of a plot device than anything else, but it definitely speaks to the heroine's character, is the small town romance where the big city lawyer, doctor, whatever, businesswoman gets fired, or in some way something happens and she conveniently inherits a house or a bed and breakfast or a piece of land or a farm or whatever, and she needs somebody to show her the way, you know, to rebuild this farmhouse, whatever. And then she decides that she's going to leave all her big city ambitions, which have been the driving force in her entire life, and settle down and just be in this small town because the hero is there, and that's enough. And it bothers me for two reasons. One is less to do with her, and that's the fact that she's the one who's sacrificing everything, and he sacrifices very little except for getting over whatever it is that's preventing him from saying "I love you." Really bothers me. And the second thing is, I don't buy it. If you have this very, very driven woman, if you watch Scandal, it's the Vermont problem, right? Olivia Pope is not going to go to Vermont and make jam. Olivia Pope is going to run the world. And so I just don't believe that this woman would give everything up unless she's going to run the best bed and breakfast and, you know, franchise that and decide that she's taking over the world, you know, from her small farmhouse in, you know, Connecticut, but she's going to do it in a really kick-ass business sort of way. I just don't buy any other depiction of her, because up until that point, the driving force behind her is her conflict about being in this small town and falling in love with this guy who's tied to this small town.
Well, it's the assumption that work and ambition are a burden on us as women, that we need to be relieved of it. And so when we move to the small town and we find Mr. Right, we don't have to do all those things anymore, which for most of us who are super ambitious, no, it's not going to stop just because we move to a small town. It's, yeah, we're going to still run the biggest, baddest bed and breakfast that anyone's ever seen, because that ambition isn't going to go anywhere. It may get rechanneled into a different avenue, but it's not going anywhere. I mean, for personal experience, I decided that I did not want anyone else to raise my kids. So when I had kids, I stepped back from archaeology, and about 4 months later, I was working for a different company from home, and about 6 months after that, I was running my own business, and I was writing because I couldn't just raise kids. It was like, oh my God.
You needed adult contact. You needed another channel for that ambition.
Exactly.
Yep.
So what are the qualities in a heroine that you guys like to see? If you're sitting down and you've got a blank page and you're writing, or if you're picking up somebody's book and you're reading, what are the things that you want to pinpoint as, I love this. This is my catnip.
As a reader, my catnip is when I see the badass, smart-mouthed, I got this, except you can see the vulnerability right under the surface in the heroine, and all of a sudden she meets the hero, that works too, hero, and it's just suddenly just like, oh shoot, how am I going to do this? And I can see that struggle in the back and forth it's going to be for the next 300 pages. I'm like, yes, please.
Very nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Mary Chris?
I think I really like kind of a quirky heroine. You know, someone who's kind of sort of, I don't know, clumsy maybe isn't the right word, but that is almost the word I'm looking for. So somebody who kind of is very smart and together in some aspect of their life, but also very clumsy in another aspect of their life. So, you know, maybe you have the smart, really together business person, kind of like Lexi was saying, who's very clumsy in love, or maybe you have someone who's actually really good at relationships, but is like navigating some professional situation they're not comfortable in. So they're really kind of clumsy in that, and so it kind of goes back to that flawed thing. But I like it to be kind of somebody who's quirky, and I read a lot of first-person fiction written in first person, so voice has a lot to do with that, I think. You know, if there's and that always has, it's hard to put that into words because it has so much to do with the author, but if they've got, like, I don't know, an interesting speech pattern, or I read recently one of Alison Winscotch's books, and she used a lot of parentheses and kind of broke down that fourth wall, and like the character would like have little side comments with you as the reader, and I don't know, I kind of like that kind of quirky voice.
Yeah, I'm definitely fond of both of those. My favorite thing is the heroine who goes toe-to-toe with the hero. I like I said, I like the tough broads who are incredibly competent at what they do. They're beyond competent. They're really gifted, and I like seeing them not get knocked down a peg. I like seeing them meeting somebody who's equally on that level as they are. You know, they kind of, their whole lives have been I don't know, just a little different, and they meet somebody who is also different and driven in the same way that they are. I find that really exciting when that really sparks. And I, I love banter, and our genres do banter really well. So I always find that sparks really nicely on the page, which is always exciting.
A couple that can banter, it's like crack. It's like you put crack on a page and gave it to me, and I'm addicted. Yeah.
It is, and it's hard to find, and it's even harder to write. So, the people who can do it well are always exciting to find. I read a lot of historical, and the Sarah MacLeans and Maya Rodales and Loretta Chases are really exciting because you can just see these people going at each other, but like in a sort of I like you, I like you, I like you, but I really shouldn't like you, but I really like you type of way.
Yeah.
So, do you think that we're harder on heroines than we are on our heroes? I know we touched slightly on this at the beginning, and I think that we actually spoke about it, Lexi, back in 2013, which seems so long ago.
When you first said that, I was like, what?
I know. We've been doing these since 2013. It's crazy. But are we tougher on these women because they're women? Are we tougher on them because we tend to insert ourselves more into their characters? What do you guys think?
Probably. Go ahead.
Well, I think as women writing women, it's easy to look at all sides of the character because we can put ourselves in the position of the character anytime we have a question. How does she feel? I don't know. I may put myself in her shoes. How does she feel? I think it's really easy to stereotype a guy. He can be the alpha. He can be. You could just give him a stereotype and then write around that.
And kind of stereotyping in a positive way.
In romance, it can definitely be a positive thing because we can latch on to that one sexy thing that's very attractive in that relationship and just, he doesn't need to be multidimensional. He just needs to look pretty.
And be really good in bed, and you're done. Easy.
He's amazing in bed.
He has no other personality traits. Don't write that book, people.
No.
But I think that's true in multiple genres, not just in romance. One or the other character tends to be the flat, undeveloped character, and it's rare that both characters are really well developed. And if any genre does it, it's romance.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was basically going to say the same thing. I think one, because especially in like first-person narrated, and especially in women's fiction, where we're not getting the male and the female point of view as often, we're typically only getting the female point of view. I think we're in their head. I mean, you're in their head, and so it is easier to kind of maybe be slightly harder on that character because, especially when you're only in the woman's head, because you're seeing more dimensions of her, and I think that can be a positive or a negative. I think sometimes that can make a character feel much more real and less flat because you know so much about her. But I think it can also kind of make you a little bit harder on her because you're seeing every aspect of her personality kind of through her perspective. So yeah, I would like to think I wasn't harder on heroines, but probably. Yeah.
I think it's tough also because I think culturally we're kind of conditioned to be tougher on other women. There's this idea that and I'm hoping that this is changing, and I think it is changing. I think there's, especially within our genre, just looking at other writers, there's a lot of positivity and a lot of kind of propping up as opposed to tearing down. But I do think that sometimes it's tempting to do things like cast the villainess as the high heel wearing, big hair, lipstick, tight dresses, which, sorry guys, that's what I wear, that's what I do, that's who I am. But
are you a villain, Julia?
I am actually a villain. I am Cruella's villain.
Oh, good. Can you help me write better villains, please?
Not a problem. But the frustration is that sometimes it's easy to drop to drop those stereotypes in and to fall back on that. And I think that in a weird sort of way we do that sometimes with heroines too, where if they have to be perfect but not too perfect, right? There has to be something wrong with them, because otherwise they're completely invulnerable, and you don't believe that they could actually be this person on a page that you're reading about. But at the same time, if they're not balancing every aspect of their lives, I think people can be harsh on them as well. So my hope is that we're writing good heroines, and that we're also kind of giving them a break, because they're real women too.
Yeah, and I think it came up earlier, that maybe we're harder on heroines, or I'm not sure in what context it came up, but maybe we see ourselves in heroines. And I think, as much as I think you're absolutely right, and I agree that hopefully we're changing to more of a rising tide lifts all boats kind of culture, but I do think women can be tough on other women. We're also notoriously extremely tough on ourselves. And so I think that can lead to being tough on a heroine in the same way that we might be tough on ourselves at times and expect ourselves to fit into kind of this superwoman, I'm gonna get everything done. And if we're feeling that pressure personally, we might inflict that on something we were reading. So I think definitely that tendency to be tough on heroines comes culturally from how women interact with each other at times, but also how we kind of interact with ourselves and what we expect of ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody want to add anything, touch on anything we haven't discussed already, or should we kick it over to our last round of endorsements?
If you guys have like favorite heroines that stand out to you that you've read that are like that you wish you had written or just loved.
Yes. I remember more of them
I have
on the spot.
Yes, sorry about that.
No, go for it. Why don't you go first?
I can go if you guys want to think about it. I think as we were talking, I was kind of thinking, and as I was listening to you guys, just kind of think back about what I've read. But I think one of my favorites, one of my kind of go-to books that I always go back to, like I think we all have those books that are good friends that, when you are feeling kind of down, you like pick them up. But mine is Meg Cabot's Queen of Babel series, and I love her main character in that book. When I was kind of talking about how I like that kind of quirky heroine, she's got this main character who kind of just has a lot of fun things kind of happen to her, and she's sort of in that early 20s finding herself, but she's got a really strong head about where she wants to go career-wise, but she's kind of fumbling her way through lots of relationships, and she's a really fun character, so I think that would probably be my number one heroine that I wish I had written. I think her name is Lizzie Nichols, but don't quote me on the heroine's name, but it's Meg Cabot's Queen of Babel, the series.
What about you, Lexi?
Well, my all-time favorite is Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara. I mean, she's not technically romance, but I mean, talk to anybody, and we talk about it in a romantic context. Scarlett O'Hara, to me, is the quintessential multi-dimensional. You want to hate her, but you also love her. She's terribly flawed, but you kind of want to be her. She loved the wrong person, but she had Rhett Butler right there. I love that story. There's just so many aspects to it, and I wish I had written it. But for modern literature, On Dublin Street is hands down. That's the book I go back to over and over again. I pick it up anytime I'm just done and I just need a good book to read. I've probably read it 10, 12 times now. But Joss and Braden, they're my favorite couple trope, and I'm waving my hands at the camera. Sorry. They have that same dynamic as like Princess Leia and Han Solo, and Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara and Joss and Braden. It's the same kind of thing. You've got two strong characters that banter and drive each other batty, and then in the end they fall in love.
Perfect. So I actually had to look mine up because I'm so bad with titles and covers and characters' names. It's like a trifecta for me. So Your Scandalous Ways by Loretta Chase has one of my favorite heroines I've ever read in it. Her name is Francesca, and she is a courtesan in Venice, and she doesn't care. I'm going to keep this PG. She doesn't care at all what you think about the fact that she's a fallen woman, and in fact she enjoys it, and she owns it, and it gives her a degree of freedom that she would not have had given her her backstory and her status in that time period. It's set in 19th century Venice. Also, Tessa Dare wrote a really wonderful book that I wish I could remember the name of right now. It's the paleontology one, and it has a heroine who is a complete nerd and just, she loves geology, and she loves fossils, and she's just, the whole story is a road trip basically to get her to a Royal Society of Archaeology, I think.
No.
Yes. No? No. Anyway.
Crossing sciences here.
Yeah, crossing sciences. Anyway, she's got a fossil. She needs to return it. She needs to get herself entry to something, and I'm messing up my sciences, and I'm going to get a lecture after this thing. But basically, that she's fantastic because she is so not clued into that whole society, the marriage market, and all of that, and she's very much her own person. And along that thread of women who are their own people, Alicia Ray's recent book, A Gentleman in the Streets, the heroine in that is very self-possessed. She knows exactly who she is. She knows exactly who she is sexually, and she's not afraid of that, and she's not afraid of what you think of her. And I think that that's very liberating to read in a book. And at the same time, she has a lot of vulnerability, and she's very upfront about that, even if she's not necessarily... She's very upfront with herself about that, even if she hides that from a lot of other people. So it's very refreshing to read that. So those are mine that I had to look up quickly and made you guys go beforehand so that I could do that. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for answering my question that I threw on you at the last minute.
You'd think we would have prepared an answer to that at some point.
We're an on-the-fly kind of show. It's what makes us so interesting.
It's true. It's true. And usually there's a lot more wine going around, but not.
I know. Why are we drinking water?
I'm not.
One of us is not.
I have water. I have water as well. Yeah.
But you did just bring up one of my favorite parts of heroines in romance. It's something that you don't get to see in any other genre, and that's their confidence and their sexuality. Not every character is that way, but there are a lot of characters in romance who, whether it's a hot book or not, you see a lot of women who are in touch with who they are, what they want in the bedroom, or just in general. You just don't see empowerment of that sort in women in a lot of other genres the way that you can in romance. And that's one reason why romance will always have a nice soft place in my heart.
We are in touch with that. You know, the idea that it is okay if they want to explore that aspect of themselves, and it's actually a really positive thing that they are encouraged and that they can ask for things and ask for what they want, and their pleasure is very centric to that. I think is a really important thing about the genre, and a really important thing about the heroines too. If you have a heroine in romance who doesn't want that, we've got some problems for the most part. Again, unless you're doing one of those kind of boundary-breaking books, it's pretty important in a genre that is known for its sexual content.
Love, romance, sex, it's all kind of intricately related, and it's a very important aspect of life, so it's important for women to have an outlet where they can explore what that means.
Absolutely. Well, we maybe should start wrapping things up here, since we're getting into the 9 o'clock hour here, and I see Lexi yawning. So you guys want to talk briefly about anything you've got to promo, any upcoming projects?
Well, right at this exact moment, if you're watching this week that we record it, Tease 1 and Stripped 1 are free through Saturday at Amazon. So if you would like to download them, if you would like a sexy read, those are free.
Just a little sexy.
Only tiny.
Yeah, we're very, very okay with the sexuality aspect of in this chat show. So
I would just like to say that this is my favorite paperback I have ever made, and it is so pretty.
It's really beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Not just the people on it, like the book itself.
But the people too.
But the people too.
You go, Mary Chris, before I say embarrassing things.
Do you have other pretty things to show us? I don't have anything.
I have lots of things.
She has a whole shelf of them.
I know, I can see them behind her. Let's see, what am I promoting? I will promo my website, which is on the little bar below me here, marychrisescobar.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I am giving away a novella called How to Fall. If you're somewhere cold, it's a nice summer love story. So I'm giving that away to anyone who signs up for my newsletter. So that's an awesome way to get a free story. I also have a serial running on my blog right now, so you can check that out while you're there. And I've got some plans for that in the future that I'll talk more about in the next chat. But yeah, so head over to my blog. There's a nice little orange box on the side, and if you share a little information with me, I will share some information with you every week, as well as share a free novella. So that's what I've got.
So I am working on another anthology with Alexis Anne and a couple other wonderful authors, and we are kind of in the throes of that right now. We just got a draft of a cover, and we're working on our drafts of the actual stories themselves. Yes, so what I'm going to pop you up so that everybody can see. That is 1 week in Wyoming. We are releasing 1 week in Hawaii coming up this May. So more details about an actual release date and all that solid pre-order information. We love people who pre-order, so we're going to have that information out. I'm also going to be speaking at the New England Romance Writers of America conference up in Boston in April, so I'll talk more about that next month when I figure out what I'm speaking about. It will be something along the lines of putting together an anthology and kind of a practical guide to everything you need to know from I'm probably more of the organizational standpoint. I can't tell you about taxes, but I can tell you how to make one badass calendar. So, so I'm going to be speaking there, and I will also be at the Liberty States conference coming up in March. I may be hosting a reader game panel thing with, or guest hosting, I should say. Or not. I may just actually be on the writing track for that. So yeah, stay up to date with more information on my website as well, and newsletters and all that good stuff. So we will be back next month. There's been some questions about whether we're doing this again, and I think we're, barring illness and crazy snowstorms and all that stuff, we are back, and we are doing First Draft the first Tuesday of every month again. So we're very excited to be back, and thank you guys for watching through with us, and hopefully we'll see you again next month. Bye, everybody.
Bye.